that we were preaching this. Remember, they killed people in the valley. It was at Jezreel, which is the valley of God, which you wasn't supposed to do. Remember? There was trouble. And so then last week we talked about the big battle. Today my sermon title is After the Battle. And so last week we had the big battle. Remember? Everybody had to show up. Ahab was not happy that Elijah came back to town. Remember? He said, hey you that troubles Israel, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm not the trouble, you're the trouble. And today we're going to see whose God is God. Right? I mean, this was last week. And so we saw this epic battle, and the 450 prophets of Baal were gathered around, and there's Elijah. And they cut their bull, and they danced around, and they cried out, and they cut themselves to get Baal's attention. And yet, there was no answer. Also, it came Elijah's turn, and what did they do? They cut the sacrifice up. They rebuilt the altar to God first that had been torn down. And then they got their sacrifice ready, and then they poured bucket after bucket after bucket of water. All filled up the trench around it. Remember? And what happened? The fire struck down, lapped up even the water in the valley around, the ditch around. Even the dust was gone. And they said, guess what, Elijah? I guess your God is God. So today, we're kind of at the end of that big epic battle. And now I'm just going to be as honest with you as I can be today. I might be a little puffed up after that. Tired, but puffed up. Because look what God did, right? Look what God did, and He did it through me. But there's a problem. Now, y'all, isn't that always the way? Something really good happens, and then lo and behold, bang, you got to face something else. Right off, I mean. And so here, Elijah tells Ahab, go up and eat and drink, for I hear the sound of rain. Now remember, Elijah was the one that 3.5 years ago had prayed there wouldn't be rain, wouldn't even be any dew, and lo and behold, no dew, no rain. And so he's telling King Ahab, hey, I hear rain. Now, you've seen all this stuff happen, right? That everyone in town has seen that God is God. And so Ahab goes up and he's eating and drinking. Just like normal everyday life, y'all. Oh. But the wife's hopping mad. Now that's just Arkansas speech there. That means she is mad, mad, mad. And so he sends his servant up and he says, go see if you see anything. Well, the guy comes back. Nope, don't see anything. Sometimes, y'all, you see stuff in your spirit. You hear stuff in your spirit before you ever see it manifested in the natural. Now, don't let me lose you because you're, oh, that Pentecostal girl. 3 years, she's coming out. No, this is real stuff. God talks to us in our spirit, man. If any of y'all ever tell me that you audibly heard God, I'm scared. It's inside. It's our spirit. The Holy Ghost that is in us that hears and responds to the Spirit of God from heaven talking to us. And so Elijah hears this, but his servant doesn't. And he runs 7 times, he goes up, and then finally he comes back and he says, hey, guess what? I see a cloud the size of a man's hand. Can I tell you, y'all, that's Old Testament version of one drop of blood will work. Oh, a cloud the size of a man's hand. See, there's promise no matter what it looks like. There's promise no matter what you've been through. And with God, a little is a lot. Oh, I got instructions from Daddy last week, excuse me. He said, you don't have to laugh. And you might need to be a little seriouser. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm walking in the joy of the And so listen, here we see that God is doing something. Life goes on, y'all, after the intense battle, after the huge victory, after everything that happened yesterday. Guess what? There's today. And no matter how good or bad yesterday was, it's just that. It's yesterday. We've got to look to today. We can't change the future. What's the Bible say? What's it good to worry for? Is it going to change anything? No. That's what happens when we try to change the future. But here, we're in today. And so, God is still showing himself mighty, y'all. Elijah prayed it wouldn't rain and it didn't. And now he prayed and it did. A gully washer. Y'all know what that is? Yeah, that's Arkansas language too for a big old rain. And so, it would look like that would be the end of it, right? I mean, he's slain 450 prophets of Baal. It's come full circle. He prayed for no rain and it didn't rain. Now he's seen rain. He's prayed for rain and here it comes. Man, this is an awesome time. 19:1 says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Oops. Anytime we do something for the Lord, our enemy's going to hear about it. And they're not going to be happy. They are not going to be cheering for you and they're not going to buy balloons. They're going to start something to keep you from being able to revel in that victory. But I want you to think about today, a cloud the size of a man's hand, and how it brought that cleansing flood to the valley of God. So, Jezebel had been the one that had ordered all the rocks. What is it, Donna? The altar of God to be tore down. She was the one that called for all the prophets of God to be killed. Remember, Obadiah kept 100 of them in the 2 caves of 50. She was the one that replaced God, the one true God, with all of her gods of Baal. Now, Baal, don't be confused about that. Baal is not a god. Baal is the name of the polytheistic God that they served. There was a lot of different gods under Baal. And so, here we see that the enemy is, and now remember, we're in Israel. Don't forget that part either. We're in God's country. And crazy has broke out. Now, does anybody see kind of a parallel at all, maybe? I don't know. So anyway, Jezebel's not having it. She's mad. She is some kind of mad. So in verse 2 she says, Then Jezebel sent the messenger to Elijah saying, So may the gods, little g with the plural, do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. So she's declared, basically, she's going to kill him, y'all. And so, should that be a problem? I mean, he just single-handedly killed 450 of the prophets of Baal. He made it not rain and made it rain. He prayed and God sent fire down that completely consumed the offering. But Jezebel. Y'all, can I tell you, all of us have a Jezebel in our life. Somebody that is not going to be happy for us no matter what happens. Somebody that's going to be against everything we stand for. Somebody that thinks that they have enough power to unseat God in our lives. And can I tell you today that ain't going to happen. That that is not going to happen, no matter what it looks like. But look here. The next part of this story is almost the best part for me. Because I don't know about you, but every once in a while, I get to looking around. And I get to seeing things that I think maybe just isn't quite right. I mean, look, I'm praying. I'm fasting. I'm reading. How come I'm aggravated over here? How come this is happening over here? I don't know. So look. Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. So he's still in God's country. He's just in the south country. And that's where, remember, that's where Ahab told him to go. Hey, if you got something else to say, we don't want to go to Judah and tell them what you got to say. Remember? And so, and he left his servant there. He left his servant in Judah. And so, sometimes, y'all, you're going to have to do it by yourself. And you know, I don't like that either. I mean, I want a buddy. I want somebody that I can turn to and say, you know, hey, what about? I mean, we used to, when I was coming up, they used to say every once in a while, you just need Jesus with some skin on him. Every once in a while, I don't want to be in the battle by myself. And so, after this huge victory, two things happened. And they happened to him and they happened to us. Elation and exhaustion. Elation and exhaustion. I guarantee you, he was so thrilled that God had shown himself mighty to the people, not on Elijah's behalf, but because he so wanted everyone to realize that there was a one true God and he was still on the throne. We've got to be that excited today that there's still in 2022 the one true God and he's still on the throne. And exhaustion. Y'all, we get tired. I know the Bible says don't grow weary in well-doing, for if you hold out, you'll get a reward from God. But listen, sometimes after you've been through the biggest battle of your life and you're so happy that you won, you're so tired you can't hardly put one foot in front of the other. And then something else comes at you and you just don't even have the energy to look at it. I can imagine how he was feeling, y'all. He didn't have anything left. He was drained. What more can happen? And so, after all that happened, he just left. He said, Israel, you know, I'm going to go on to Judah. So he did. And so, but then in verse 4, y'all, he left his servant in verse 3 at the end. But then in verse 4, he went by himself a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Now, y'all, he's talking about those people that he just re-showed God. I'm going to have to restate that, I think. Y'all are looking kind of... So, his ancestors would have been the Israelites that he just came back to town to say, look, God's still God. And so you might think, well, wait a minute, all that stuff still happened. He knows he ran. Okay? He knows he ran. He's come to himself. Have you ever done that? Have you ever acted in that moment and then you take a day's journey into the wilderness and nobody to talk to but you and God, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man. He said, I'm no better than they are. You might as well just go on and take me. And see, we preach this. I'm sure you've heard it. I've preached it, I'm sure. That he was just having a pity party. Oh, he just ran and he had a... No, in this verse, he came to himself. This was not, oh, let me die because I'm just so horrible. This was, oh my goodness. I thought I knew better. I thought I did better. And look, I did the same thing they do. Turned from you. I wasn't brave enough to stand up to Jezebel after I'd seen all that you'd done. Verse 5, then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Because you know what, y'all? When you're exhausted, you're tired. And now, men, I don't know if you do this, but women do this. Like you just get to the end of your rope and you just be like, I'm gonna go lay down. Right? If you've made me mad enough to make me cry, you better hope I go cry myself to sleep. Now, if you've hurt my feelings bad enough for me to go lay down, I'm gonna cry myself to sleep. Here's the thing, y'all. There's something about rest. No matter what your emotional state is, you think if you can just get a little rest, everything will be okay. Fell asleep. Suddenly the angel touched him and said to him, get up and eat. He looked, and there was at his head was a cake baked on a hot stone and a jar of water. He ate and he drank and he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, get up and eat, or the journey will be too much for you. Can I tell you something today? No matter what your journey is, it is too big a task for you if God has not provided the sustenance. If He's not your keeper and your provider, you're not going to make it. The journey's going to be too tough. So, he got up and he ate and drank, and then he went into the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. God's provision is enough. Y'all, don't be ashamed of needing rest and restoration. Don't be ashamed if you wake up and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm no different than the one that I was just trying to tell how they're doing it wrong. I'm no different than those that, have told me and told me and told me how God provides, and then, I had a need and just ran away from the problem. God sustains us during all our times, y'all. During doubt, during security, all the time, every emotion that runs through our lives, God sustains us. And so he didn't have a lack of faith, which he gets a bad rap for a lot. He had a coming to God moment. He had a realization that even in his mistake, God was faithful. I'm going to take a nap. I wake up. Things are better because the provision of God is right there in front of me. This cake and the water. Oh, the bread of life, y'all. And the living water. And so, let God sustain y'all. Look and see that cake on the rock and that cup of water. It was 40 days and 40 nights he spent with God. And it's okay to give every last ounce of energy you have to God, y'all. But know that there will be a time of refilling. He'd give out everything that he had, mentally, physically, emotionally. He fought the good fight for God. Him and God won. And then he had to rest and be restored and let God do the providing. And y'all, we do too. We do too. It's lonely sometimes standing for God. Sometimes you even have to leave those that you think are standing with you. So don't be surprised by that either. Sometimes it's going to be just you and God. And I assure you, there is no better place to be. So, at verse 9, at that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I get tickled. God knew where he was, but Elijah still didn't. Does that make sense? I mean, God wasn't surprised, but he wanted to know what Elijah thought the next step was. It's not that God didn't know. It's that Elijah needed to know. And so he answered, and he said, in verse 10, he answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites, having forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Now, you got to know that Elijah knows God knows that. So I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that he might have been being a little salty. You know, he might have had a little bit of attitude. You know, I've served you. I did all this stuff, and now look. Now they're trying to kill me. That's why I'm here. I can't speak for you, y'all, but I might have been like that a time or two. I might have. So today, here God asks you, what are you doing here? And answer him honestly. He is big enough to take your saltiness. He is big enough to take your doubt. He is big enough to take your heartbreak. He can handle it. You can't. If you're not honest with him, you're going to still be carrying that around. It's going to be like a millstone around your neck. It's going to be an ever-present weight. Give it over to him. He can take it. And so, then he said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks into pieces before the Lord, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. See, you didn't find him in that. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. God is not always in the big show. This scripture represents ways that God had already shown himself mighty on behalf of the Israelites. They had already seen these great and mighty events happen. Fire was the most recent one, and we've talked about that a minute ago. But he didn't find God in any of the usual ways. It was silent. And guess what? When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he answered, "I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, and for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left. Go and return on your way." Y'all listen. Listen, he was not found in the usual way. He was found in that silence. But in that silence, there was no mistaking that he wasn't done with Elijah. He's not done with a single one of us either. In that silence, when there's nothing else but God. Know that He's talking to you. So he said in verse 15, Then the Lord said to him, Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael, that is king over Aram. You shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah, as prophet in your place. Look here, you don't get to retire till you've raised up the next one. Y'all aren't finished. Isn't that awesome? That we get to bring up the next generation of prophet? Isn't that incredible? That even if we think that he had a lapse of faith and ran for his life because he didn't think God was able, God still thinks he's able. The faithfulness of God never fails, even when we do. He's raising up Elisha to take his place. And so whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill, and whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. God can show his power any way he wants to. But don't miss him looking for the usual. Don't miss him the way you think he's supposed to come. Because sometimes he's in the silence. Sometimes he's in the blankness. We look for God in the magnificence of his power, y'all. But in his presence, we're changed. His power enthralls us, but his presence transforms us. I don't want to be entertained. I want to be changed. I'm not going to the movie. I'm going to the doctor. God's not done with Elijah, and he's not done with us either. He tells Elijah to tell him all about it, and then he tells him to move on from it. I mean, please don't miss that. He cares about what you're going through, but he's not going to let you stay there. You know, the beauty part about going through a valley or going through a trial is that's just it. You're going through it. There's something on the other side. And so Elijah gets to anoint his replacement. And guess what? There's 7,000 more that have served the Lord that hadn't bowed to Baal. Now, y'all, I know we seem by ourselves sometimes. And I know it seems hard. But God is faithful, and we're not the only ones serving him. His provision is enough, and he's a big enough God to face anything we tell him. And so now next week, we're going to see what happens with Elijah's replacement, Elisha. And now look, I'm telling you, we're still in this epic story. Next week, you're not going to believe what happens. I mean, it just, yeah, it's something else. Silence. Let us encounter you this week, God. Let us see who all is working with us. Let us see your provision, the living bread, the living water. Let us serve you, Lord, with all we have. And when we've poured out entirely and we are just elated from the victory and exhausted, from the battle, let us turn to you. Seek you rest. Seek your security. Lord, let your blessing chase them down and overtake them. Let your face shine upon them. And in all ways, Lord, our prayers that you be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.